Welcome back. Corporate affairs, good governance, global accounting standards, Sri Lanka's investment climate and much more were discussed during our exclusive interview with Asitha Thalwatta, who is country managing partner of Ernst & Young. Welcome to Benchmark. Asitha, what's on your wish list when it comes to corporate affairs and governance for 2012?
For corporates, I would like to see continued corporate growth alongside strong corporate governance and a focus on sustainability, wider than just economic performance, but the people part, the society part, and things like that, and the environment, of course. In addition, there is a need for corporates to invest, supporting the intent of government to grow our economy at 8% for the third consecutive year. So I'd like to see these dimensions in terms of performance of corporates in the oncoming year.
What about accounting standards?
It's close to home now. Sri Lanka has announced accounting standards to be effective 1st January 2012. So this is a very important year for the business committee in terms of implementation.
So what's new when it comes to accounting standards? What are we going to see?
From a broader perspective, the accounting community worldwide has realized that a common accounting language is a useful thing to have because investors now invest across the globe with globalization, and therefore they need to understand financial statements in whichever country it is. Sri Lanka can't be left alone, can't be alone in this, can't be left out in the cold. We have a need for foreign investment, whether it be FDI or portfolio investment, and in that sense it's a need. 120 countries have already converged, and Sri Lanka is one of them that has come into this process. So it's an exciting time, it's an important time, and I think it's a very timely and opportune for us to do that. In terms of are we ready, this is a question often asked, and perhaps you having that in your mind as well. There's a lot of training, development, workshops that's gone on over the last few months, and many corporates have brought in expert advisors to do what they call a gap analysis, of looking at where they are, where they ought to be, and what needs to be done to bridge that. And that's underway at the moment in almost all the large corporates which are listed. So in that sense, I think we are well on stream to achieve the plan and target, and this should help in improving the inflows into the stock market.
So am I right in assuming that accounting standards around the globe are more or less unified and Sri Lanka is now well on its way? Now, are we on par, or are we taking a little bit longer, or are we delaying the process in some format?
We are very much on par and on track. There are certain challenges. This question of is it the right time, is there capacity, are corporates too small? These are all questions that have been asked, and it's inevitable that this year there will be some tweaking that may need to be done to make sure that corporate reporting is on track. We don't want to get stuck in this and not be able to meet the timelines and targets and information requirements for the stock exchange. But I think we are very much timely and on track.
Asitha, why is it that there being so many rules and regulations and guidelines and standards and for all intents and purposes, big corporations, small corporations, listed companies, all supposed to follow these guidelines to the letter, and then we see Enron and we see Golden Key here and we see all these things happening. Now, isn't the public going to lose confidence? So, I mean, they have lost confidence. When are we going to regain confidence in the whole system, as it were?
I guess the short answer is there's no substitute for honesty and integrity. But having said that, I think there are certain things that cause a propensity for this. For instance, if there is far too much unrealistic expectation on corporates to perform, there's a disproportionate amount of remuneration given to senior management, which is variable, which is performance driven. Independence of auditors and their professionalism, and then the regulators, if they don't have capacity, and also if they cannot work without fear and favor, if there's interference in their work, these are aspects which give some propensity to issues of the nature that you're talking about. There is no sort of easy way of dealing with this, but strong governance and very strong regulatory pressure, where anybody who defaults, who's found short of intentional manipulation of financial statements or gross negligence on the part of the auditor should be very quickly brought to book under the law, and that would be a deterrent.
The whistleblowing culture, is it here to stay? Do you see it increasing? Are people more vigilant?
I think so, yes. But unfortunately, if you look back at the track record of these people, it has not necessarily supported them in their careers. So there might be a need to enable information to be given through channels like, confidentially talking to the audit committee or to a senior person on the board, through sort of email links set up particularly for this purpose and so on. Whether they would really come out and identify themselves is debatable because of career issues and so on. Of course, we all know that if you allow this, you could open the door to frivolous complaints. So therefore, objectively, these complaints got to be, sifted, looked at, examined, and then dealt with appropriately. But certainly, there's a need to, I wouldn't say encourage, but have a process where someone who's very uncomfortable having seen this is able to share it with somebody else.
So Sri Lanka expects her FDIs for 2011 to be something around $1 billion US dollars, and for 2012 double that, $2 billion dollars, so to speak. And the BOI approved nearly 100 projects last year and another 100 in the pipeline. When you look at our FDIs, are you happy with what we have, with the pickup of late? Is there scope for more of this, and how are we going to do it?
I think it's a good start, getting to 1 billion, which is the best that the country has done so far. And the target for 2 is ambitious, and it's timely and necessary. So the question is, how do we get there? I think there is also a fair pipeline of projects in terms of the Colombo South Port, although we saw some press today that there's a question about it. But I'm sure someone will pick up the project and go ahead. There's the new hotel projects that are on stream. There's the development in Hambantota, which is still the second phase to be done, the investment to come in, and so on. But I do agree that there is a need for a greater push, and perhaps, in my view, there is a need to target large corporates overseas, in the US, in Europe, in Japan, in China, in many of the developed countries, to look at their South Asia strategy and to see whether we could invite them in specifically one-on-one. Just having conferences and workshops and informing them about the country conditions might not be sufficient. So you might need those who can introduce you to these companies, and there would be consultancy organizations which can open the doors, and you might want to present the case specifically to them, having understood whether they have a strategy towards this part of the world.
The much debated expropriation bill, Sri Lanka's potential as a niche outsourcing destination, and how to get the Sri Lankan diaspora to return or invest in their homeland. We put these issues to Asitha Talwatha in the second half of our interview. So we are back after our break. Thank you for staying with us. Now we return to our exclusive interview with the country managing partner of Ernst & Young, Asitha Talwatha. So what does the expropriation bill actually do to foreign investor confidence?
My take or view is that, if there's, it was sort of, the process was the concern mainly, in the sense that, it came from, at least the business community know of its, that it was in the offing. It may have been contemplated over time, but it just suddenly came up. It was very quickly taken through, and that was a concern. And also the listed companies coming into, some of the listed companies coming into the bill is a concern. But looking at it another way, if there is state assets which are underutilized, I'm sure in the better interests of economic development, if a particular organization cannot make use of it, it's best that it be put to better use to somebody who can bring in the resources and put that piece of state asset, in most cases land, into better use. So I think the intentions of doing that are okay. The process which followed, which it took, was so expeditious that there was no consultation and so on. So I guess, but that having been said, what are the, what's the message that comes up? Is there is at this point in time, or there's been some concern, and those questions are asked by foreign investors. But government has also come out and explained themselves in various fora and various media. So I guess we should now put it behind us and move forward, engage in a dialogue that this doesn't happen again in the sense that unexpectedly, and not let this be a sort of a sore point and irritation.
On the subject of Sri Lanka becoming a KPO and BPO hub, there's been a lot of talk about it. How confident are you that we can actually become a niche, we can find a niche to become a quality outsourcing destination?
It's a very competitive field, no doubt. But again, the Gartner top 30, Gartner is an agency which surveys the countries which are competitive and have a potential for BPO. I have ranked Sri Lanka within the top 30 for the last 3 or 4 years, and the ranking has improved again, and on the basis of government support, on the basis of infrastructure, and the basis of I think these were the two. There were 2 or 3 factors on which they improved. So that's one. So there's an international agency which says, we are competitive. Also, in terms of the cost of the services, we are cheaper than India, China, Malaysia, Singapore, and so on. So in that sense, we are competitive in terms of the cost. The one aspect, then there's tax incentives that have been offered. So that's another factor which is in our favor. The perhaps a little bit of perception negative is that, if I could draw focus on the accountants in particular, is that they see this as a monotonous work. They don't see much career potential. The working hours are sometimes not synchronized to the local working hours. So there is some concern. But that having been said, I look at this no different to an accountant spending 3 or 4 years with an accounting firm where they really learn their basics and get their grounding. A few years with a BPO might give them very good understanding of processes, best-in-class processes that some of the large multinational corporates would want these BPOs to work under. So I think it should got to be sold to them in that fashion, that it's a good part of their career progression. But you might not be able to hold them for a long period, but 2 to 3 years, and turnover is not an uncommon thing in this industry. So BPO is important to us. How do we take it the next step? I think the easiest is the multinationals which are already present in Sri Lanka should know the ground conditions, and Sri Lankan diaspora once again should be engaged in some fashion to try and promote this further.
So, looking at Sri Lanka from a BPO and KPO context, if you were to do a SWOT analysis, what would it be?
Government support, the tax incentives, exchange control, benefits that have been provided are on one aspect to attract BPOs. Then the skill availability clearly is good. Accounting skills are there in abundance. There's also other skills like legal, medical, and so on. The costs in Sri Lanka are lower than many other countries that have come within that Gartner 30. So all these put together, the technology availability in terms of the telecommunications technology is very good as well. So I think we are very competitive. The real issue is how to sell this, and that's where I was thinking that the multinationals that are already here, which are connected globally, would be in the best position to try and push it to their corporate offices saying, why not Sri Lanka? The other is the Sri Lankan diaspora working in these larger multinationals. So a strategy how to, to convince them and to get it through to them is what I think we need.
Brain drain, is it hurting your profession or have you managed?
I think we managed quite well. It used to be a bigger problem. We had about 30% of our membership working overseas, I would say 15 years ago. It's down to about 20 now. Most professionals, academics, scientists and so on would want to do a stint overseas, and I think it's a good thing for them to acquire knowledge, for them to get some savings, and hopefully a large percentage would come back in. Some would want to stay on. The challenge or the need really is to be able to give that knowledge within Sri Lanka. So I'd like to see more top-end universities setting up here, more professional conferences, research activities and things like that, which would give opportunity for knowledge acquisition by the younger generation. So we want to continue to grow the level of knowledge. And I think the need why most of these people go overseas, partly the financial aspect, partly to acquire knowledge. But it's not a huge issue the way I see it as far as our profession is concerned.
You mentioned earlier that the diaspora needs to be involved and to be enticed to start contributing. Now, how are we going to do that realistically and on the ground? Is it simply a far-fetched strategy, or can it really be done?
It ought to be done, and it can be done. I think diaspora to invest not only their knowledge but financially. The thing is, the process, I think it should be led by some government agency. Professional associations should get involved. Investment banks should be involved. Media in terms of print as well as social media needs to be involved. So there needs to be a big thrust of saying, be part of this development drive, and there's a place for you, and in the different thrust industries that the government is trying to promote in terms of the different ways in which they can invest. Already we see interest. I mean, there's a lot of people who ask us, is it the right time to come back? One of the things I tell them is it's a very difficult, we can't make decisions for others. But I usually say is, if you can get back, then maybe it's the right time to come. In other words, if you can come in and you're not happy, and then you can always find a place back in wherever you were, then perhaps it's okay to make that decision. But they don't necessarily have to come back in here, but they could make investments. They could be, but right now physical movement is not necessarily the case. It could be investment in terms of finances or into some projects, private equity. It could be disseminating their knowledge by being accessible to professional institutions, academic institutions here, to impart their knowledge through other forms of media rather than physical movement. Or they could come in here. I think there must definitely be a big push to get them involved, and I would like to see that happen.
That was Asita Talwate of Ernst & Young. After the break, we have Sri Lanka's only Sinhala language biz journal, Vyaparika Handa, and another one of Media Services publications, the Living Colombo Guide. That's on the Voice of Business.